What if God hated you? I don't mean because you sinned or anything like that. I'm asking, what if you finally met God and he despised you? Actually, he hates all of humanity. He hates life itself. What would your reaction be to that revelation? How would you feel to learn that? You might ask, why would such a powerful and all-knowing being hate me? How could he hate life itself? Believe it or not, this is what Mortal Kombat characters are dealing with. The true god of their universe is everything I just described. And I'm not talking about Raiden or Shinnok, the Elder Gods, or even Kronika. None of them compare to the actual god of Mortal Kombat. This being is responsible for all life in the universe, so why does this same godly entity despise life itself? Why does this god want all life to end? Keep in mind, this same monster is why Shao Kahn starts merging realms. Yeah, that's right, it almost never gets mentioned by NetherRealm in recent games, either because they forgot, or maybe they find the whole concept too morbid. But the Mortal Kombat series is all about death. For Pete's sake, it became popular for fatalities. So honestly, it does make sense for the god of this universe to crave death above all else. Yeah, the Mortal Kombat god is so very interesting, which is why today's video is all about the One Being. Hi everyone, if you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like down below, then consider subscribing so you never miss any future videos. Let's try and reach 2,000 likes and 500,000 subscribers before GTA 6 finally releases, whenever that's gonna happen. But alright, the One Being, an entity that barely gets mentioned in recent Mortal Kombat games. So I wanted to fully dive into this character for today's video. Not only because the One Being is fascinating, but also because the games do a terrible job explaining how horrifying he actually is. And I say he, but keep in mind the One Being doesn't have a gender because it's all life and reality itself. In fact, he's not meant to have a body either, or a true physical appearance. But that didn't stop NetherRealm from creating this in Mortal Kombat X, which looks really lame. And the same goes for Battle of the Realms. This is not the One Being, it's just a lazy Shinnok redesign. No, seriously, look at these two images on screen. They thought we wouldn't notice. Today I'm telling you about the real One Being, so let's start at the beginning. Because in the Mortal Kombat universe, the One Being has been around since the beginning of all time itself. And like mentioned earlier, he is existence itself, which is crazy to think about. Basically everything and anyone is wrapped into one creature. However, despite his name, the One Being is not the only being to exist at the start of time. There is also the Elder Gods, along with the Furies, who almost never get mentioned. But these three distinct entities all lived alongside one another, the One Being, the Elder Gods, and the Furies. But then one day, for a reason that's never really explained, the Elder Gods attacked the One Being. Yeah, straight up, they jumped him, and using magic, they tore him apart, which led to the creation of every realm in Mortal Kombat. That's right, ripping apart the One Being created life itself and reality itself, or at least reality as human beings and other mortals can understand it. So that's Outworld, Earthrealm, the Netherrealm, and so on. You get the idea. All of it came along from killing the One Being. Well, not exactly killing, since you can't kill reality itself, but more on that later. Tearing up the One Being also created mortal life itself, so humans, animals, monsters, and so on. In fact, even lesser gods like Raiden came from this event as well, killing the One Being. So in other words, tearing apart the One Being led to all life itself, with the exception of Elder Gods and Furies who already existed alongside him. And soon after life began, the Elder Gods chose to rule over these new realms and also prevent them from merging back together. Yeah, that's a very big deal, and we'll talk about it more later on. Just for now, keep in mind that realms merging is a big no-no. They must remain separate. But next up, I've got to mention the Furies real quick. They maintain order and balance throughout the universe. Yeah, in other words, they hold reality together, which is a pretty big deal. We learn about them in the very first Mortal Kombat game, long before the Elder Gods ever get mentioned. Likely because the first game is a giant parody of Big Trouble in Little China. Everything down from Raiden to the tournament and the characters, almost all of it is a direct parody from that popular movie, including the Furies themselves. But I digress. The Furies use the Mortal Kombat tournament itself to maintain balance in the universe, at least partially. And in later games, it's very loosely implied that the Furies limit what the Elder Gods can and can't do. So for example, winning 10 straight Mortal Kombat tournaments allows you to merge another realm. Yeah, which is Shao Kahn's main goal ever since Mortal Kombat 2, to win Mortal Kombat 10 times in a row and then absorb Earthrealm into his own realm of Outworld, which keep in mind has already absorbed Edenia, so he's about to have 3 realms merged into one, which like mentioned earlier is a big no-no to the Elder Gods. They never want this to happen, which had many Mortal Kombat fans asking why not just remove the tournament, because no Mortal Kombat tournament means no merging of realms. That would be an easy solution to the Elder Gods problem, right? But once again, there's the Furies. They rely on the Mortal Kombat tournament to help balance reality itself, which is why the Elder Gods can't remove the Mortal Kombat tournament or its rules. I wish the recent games explained this because they never do, and it makes the whole situation very confusing to fans, including myself, until I did more research. And honestly, I'm kind of implying most of this because after the first early Mortal Kombat games, the Furies never get mentioned much at all. But alright, let's move on. What's so bad about merging the realms? Why do the Elder Gods fear this idea so much? Well, to understand that, we have to work backwards, but it's pretty simple actually. Remember, all life itself came from tearing apart the one being. This created all the different realms and life as we know it in the Mortal Kombat universe, which means every realm is a piece of the one being. Think of him like Exodia from Yu-Gi-Oh! Unless you're too young for that reference or just not nerdy enough. Just imagine every realm is a puzzle piece, and when you put them together, it makes the one being stronger. And once he gets strong enough, the one being can just start forcibly pulling himself back together, which would lead to the end of all life itself as we know it. Because like mentioned a few minutes earlier, the one being used to be all life itself. So if he gets enough pieces back together and starts merging the realms himself, then all life within those realms would also merge into him, thus removing individuality as we know it. All of us would become the one being once again, which is a big no-no for the Elder Gods, not only because they rule over mortal life and want to keep everybody safe a little bit. They're not good at it, but they try. I do think they care, and one of their main goals is to stop the one being from ending mortal life. However, on top of that, Mortal Kombat X implies that the one being could take revenge on the Elder Gods and just consume them into himself as well. In fact, the Elder Gods used surprise last time to beat the one being. He had no clue they would attack him. The guy was just vibing. But now he knows better, so if the one being gets back to full power, you're never separating him ever again. All life itself would be gone forever. The possibility of individuality or any separate personalities would never happen again if the one being comes back together. So that's the big reason why the Elder Gods are terrified of realms merging into each other. Mortal Kombat 9 kind of implies this and does an okay job, but it's a bit too vague for most fans to catch, including myself back in 2011. I didn't understand why the Elder Gods didn't care about invasion, but cared about the realms merging, because to me it was the same thing, but now I know better. One realm invading another doesn't make the one being stronger, but merging two realms together absolutely does, because the puzzle pieces come together then and make him stronger. Yeah, but now it's time for a big truth bomb, alright? A crazy revelation. What if I told you that Shao Kahn and Onaga, even Shinnok, all of them turn evil because of the one being's influence over them? Yeah, like a Jedi mind trick, some Star Wars crap happening, alright? Believe it or not, that is why Shao Kahn wants to merge realms out of nowhere. The one being is subtly influencing him as best he can, because he never went away completely. He's just been reduced to a ghost pretty much. In fact, beyond a ghost. He's like a voice in your head. That's the most he can be at this point, in like Mortal Kombat 2 when Shao Kahn's trying to merge realms. But even in this weakened state, he's making progress. The one being is convincing Shao Kahn to merge realms together. He already succeeded with Outworld merging into Edenia. So his next stop is Earthrealm, mainly because that's where the strongest warriors are. So if Shao Kahn can beat Earthrealm and merge that together, it's pretty much over for the rest of the realms. The Netherrealm, Order Realm, Chaos Realm, they don't stand a chance once Earthrealm falls. But don't worry, things get even crazier. When Shao Kahn failed to merge Earthrealm and became much weaker in Mortal Kombat 4, suddenly Shinnok appears with the exact same goal, and that's no coincidence. The One Being is now using Shinnok as a new tool to merge the realms together, but he fails almost immediately. Does even worse than Shao Kahn, you could argue. So next up is Onaga, who, you guessed it, is also trying to merge realms together. In fact, in his Deception ending, which got cut from the final version of the game, but gamers somehow found it, if you beat the arcade ladder as Onaga, he defeats the Elder Gods and merges all the realms together, becoming the One Being himself, more or less. So yeah, he was also being manipulated by the One Being into becoming the One Being, but hey, it's a win-win. Let me know how you feel about this in the comments down below, because honestly, I think it's really cool how almost every villain in Mortal Kombat, at least the major villains, were all being influenced by the One Being. Maybe not completely, because he never mind controlled them directly, but he was a voice in their ear. He was their motivation to an extent, which I actually find really cool. Shao Kahn was already evil, don't get it twisted. Same with Shinnok. I don't think Onaga was ever evil, but he was still being influenced by the One Being and led to him coming back if you beat the game with Onaga. So yeah, behind the scenes this whole time, the main villain of the entire Mortal Kombat series was God. Like, literally God is the biggest villain in Mortal Kombat history. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like down below. It helps the channel out a ton. Like mentioned earlier, let's try and get 2,000 likes on today's video at least. Then finish that combo by subscribing and ringing that bell so you never miss any future videos. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.